afternoon, Your Excellencies, members of the academia present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen that have linked up from all corners of the world, and noble members of the Nigerian Global Roundtable, and members of the PLPO Foundation present. You are all welcome. I would also like to recognize the presence of Dr. Ibrahim Hassan of the CBN and Dr. Omar Farouk Ibrahim for Apple. Those are our immediate past guest speakers. We recognize the presence of all our previous discussants, and we recognize the presence of members of the Robo Renaissance Society present, as well as the leaders of the Nigerian Diaspora Organization and all other organizations present. Once again, you are all welcome to this important webinar on the challenges of intra-Africa's integration resulting from our post-colonial partitions and leadership problems. As you know, the African continent has been plagued by poor performances in many areas which have been ascribed to inadequate leadership that many have attributed to the partitioning of the continent by the former colonial occupiers. Meanwhile, after 60 years or more of independence, where are some African countries not making progress? And why is it impossible to rearrange the continent and have continued to be held down by these boundaries? Perhaps we shall get to understand some of the issues better at the end of this important webinar. I am Dr. James Edobor, an economist and the convener of the Nigerian Global Roundtable. Your chief host for today. My co-host is Dr. Peter Agwi. Before going on to introduce our guest speakers and the panelists, let me say a few words on who the Nigerian Global Roundtable are. The Nigerian Global Roundtable is an NGO think tank aimed at pursuing good governance and accountability to facilitate economic empowerment and overall development of Nigeria and Africa at large. The Think and Do NGO is a legal entity registered in Vienna, Austria, but draws its membership from distinguished Nigerian professionals from across the world. And now, I have the honor to introduce our distinguished guest speaker and discussants. Without any exaggeration, our guest speaker today has become a household name in Africa and beyond. He has so many titles and awards that I think it will take almost an hour to recite them all. He is a man who speaks truth to power without fear or favor. The only thing that seems to drive him is the improvement of Africa. For lack of time, I'm going to limit my introduction to the essentials. Professor PLO Lumumba is the founder of the PLO Lumumba Foundation and a consultant with Lumumba and Lumumba Advocates, a member of the Africa Justice Group. He is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and Tanganyika and a certified mediator. He is a fellow of the Institute of Certified Public Secretaries of Kenya, a fellow of the Kenya Institute of Management, and honorary fellow of the African Academy of Sciences. He is the chairman of Farafina. He is the chairman, of Farafina Investment Group in Monrovia, Liberia, an economic strategic growth and development initiative for Africa based in Nigeria. He has authored several books on diverse subjects with several species on diverse subjects delivered in and outside Africa. Lumumba is recognized as one of the leading public speakers in Africa and the African in diaspora. He is the founder of several organizations, including the PLO Lumumba Foundation, a charitable organization that has been in operation since 1990. He has also been twice recognized as one of the 100 most influential Africans. Professor Lumumba is more like a household name in Africa and beyond. So our other discussant, or rather our first discussant, is Professor Godwin. Darah. Godwin Darah is professor of oral literature and folklore. He obtained his PhD from the University of Ibadan on the oral literature of the Urhobo people of the Niger Delta, Nigeria. He has about 50 years of teaching and research experience. He has taught at the University of Ibadan, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Delta State University, Abraka, and University of Africa, Bayelsa, all in Nigeria. Darah was president, Nigerian Folklore Society, Nigerian Oral Literature Association, member, Nigerian National Commission for Museums and Monuments, the International Society for the Oral Literatures of Africa, and Nigerian National Consultant to UNESCO on Intangible Cultural Heritage. So he's also working, with Nigerian organizations. He is a member of the Nigerian Academy of Letters. Darah's Pan-African credentials are evident in his scholarly professional engagements. He was secretary of the Ibadan Committee on Apartheid, South Africa in the 1970s. Between 1998 to 2001, he chaired the Nigerian-South Africa Dialogue Committee that organized 2 bilateral conferences on Africa's democratic recovery in Lagos and Johannesburg. South Africa's President Thabo Mbeki attended the second conference. Darah has vast experience in mass media practice. For 10 years, he was chair of the editorial boards of Nigeria's leading newspapers, the Daily Times and the Guardian. Darah served on the UN Media Committee in Nigeria. He was journalist delegate to the 1995 UN Summit on Social Development in Denmark and was editor guest of the government of South Korea. Darah published a weekly newspaper column for 12 years during military regimes in Nigeria. He was also of the Nigerian Committee of the Reparations Campaign in the 1990s. Darah has numerous academic publications, including 10 books. He has attended international conferences on Africa and the African diaspora in Africa, North America, Europe, and Asia. He was Chief of Staff, Delta State Government, and delegate to the 2014 National Conference in Nigeria. He's an activist intellectual on the issue of federalism and environmental justice in the oil-rich Niger Delta region of Nigeria. So you are welcome too, sir. Our second discussant is Mr. Godwin Etakubuebu. Godwin Etakubuebu, known on air as the Guru, is a creative veteran journalist with about 40 years experience with high commitment to investigating, researching, writing, broadcasting, and publishing that cut across all strata, print, electronic, and online social media in the journalism industry. His authority in dissenting and analyzing topical issues as he does on radio and television regularly is derived from his in-depth knowledge of both the Nigerian and global environment. A skill is sharpened from his early days as the crime editor of the Punch newspapers in the early 80s. He is a classical columnist, author, writer, commentator, and currently the editor at large of the second largest leading online media in Nigeria. The news guru. He is also the guest host of the popular radio show at Lagos Talks, known as Agwi and the Guru, reviewing topical issues weekly. He is also author of books and many papers. The third discussant and last is my co-host, who is Dr. Peter Agwi. Dr. Peter Agwi is an architect with a PhD in town and regional planning from the Kiev Technical University in Ukraine. Dr. Agwi has done a lot of work, including heading different non-governmental organizations at various capacities and times, including as vice chairman of the defunct Edo State Association and president of Nigerians in Diaspora Organization, Germany. Dr. Agwi currently is an executive director of APO Consulting Limited and lives and works in Berlin, Germany, as well as involved in various real estate projects in Nigeria. I welcome you all, sirs, to this event that I hope will produce some valuable takeaways at the end of the webinar. We hope this will be the beginning of long-term mutual relationship between the Lumumba Foundation and the Nigerian Global Roundtable. Before I hand over to Professor Lumumba, let me just mention that while the guest speaker and discussants are speaking, all microphones shall be muted. Participants shall have the opportunity to ask questions or make brief contributions later. All participants can use the chat function to ask questions or make comments. Kindly avoid talking until you have been called upon to do so. Thank you. May I now call on Professor Lumumba, our chief guest speaker today. I'm excited to have you here, sir, to be a part of us today. To start his presentation, please. Thank you.
Yes, so let me say how thankful I am to join the panelists and also to very briefly share my thoughts with you on a subject that I believe all of us are familiar with, that is the challenges of inter-African integration. And particularly now, and if you permit me, I will start by giving a context of what the situation is in Africa now before I get into the history of it. As you know, Africa is now roughly divided into what, depending on who you are talking to, 55 or 54 countries. And the 55th has always been a struggle between Morocco and the Arab Democratic Republic of Sahrawi. And as we are aware, the African leadership headquartered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, declared the year 2020 as the year of silencing the guns. The view then was that if Africa was to realize the gains that she has promised herself in Africa Agenda 2063, it was not only critical, but mandatory that the guns be silenced. The year 2020 came and went, and you and me know, courtesy of what we have read, for those of you who read, and those of us who travel across the continent of Africa, that indeed, with the situation on the ground is that there are many more conflicts this year than there were in the year 2020. And if you permit me, let me just take you through what is happening right now. We start with northern Mozambique, which is now grappling with ISIS in Cabo Delgado. So it's unsettled in that part of the world. You come to Mogadishu, which, as you know, is unsettled. Ethiopia, which is the headquarters of the African Union, has an ongoing problem in Tigray. And of course, there are also other organizations which are agitating, like the Oromo Liberation Front. You go to Sudan, you find an unsettled situation there in Bahr el Ghazal, not in Bahr el Ghazal, but in Darfur and in the Nuba Mountains. You go to South Sudan, there is an unsettled situation there. Central African Republic, only yesterday, the Prime Minister resigned. In Burkina Faso last week, 160 people killed. In Chad, in Mauritania, in Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, of course, we know what is happening in Libya, in Mali, in Mauritania. That is the state of the continent of Africa. And one of the things that you see that is very constant is the continued intervention, particularly of France. France has been present in the ongoing conflicts in Mali, in Chad, and we also know the activities of Belgium, and we know the activities of the so-called United Kingdom and other countries such as the United States of America, increasingly, albeit in a very subtle way, China. And all these things have come about because of what I'll describe as the Bismarckian boundaries. which were created in Berlin in 1884 to 1885. And it must always be remembered that the meeting in Berlin was convened at the behest of the European powers of the day in order to reduce conflicts amongst themselves for the purpose of ensuring that they exploited Africa without conflict. When African countries started regaining independence, if you remember very well, in the meeting that was held between the 23rd, I think, to the 25th days of May in 1963, there were those who took the view that the inherited colonial boundaries should be disturbed. But Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Kambarage Nyerere took the view that if we started disturbing those boundaries, then there would be uncontrollable conflict. And that is how the doctrine of the inviolability of the inherited boundaries came about, which was then reinforced at a meeting held a year later in Cairo, in Egypt. So we kind of took the view that we have inherited boundaries that were created arbitrarily, dividing nations, but it was better that we did the best that we could do with them rather than to undo them. And it is the voice of Nkrumah that is loudest and perhaps most eloquent on the 25th day of May, when he says that if we don't unite, then what is going to happen is that our very minimal, or if minimized, if you may, ethnic differences will be magnified by the erstwhile colonial powers, and we will be in conflict with one another, and that would be to the benefit of the European powers. Nkrumah's prophecy has come true. And right now we can see what is happening across the continent of Africa. If it is not in Liberia, it is in Senegal. If it is not in Senegal, it's in the Gambia. In the Cameroons, we know the story of the Amazonians. In Nigeria, we now know what is happening with IPOB and Biafra, the Oduduwa Republic. And we know the Hausa Fulani problem. We know what is happening in Burkina Faso. We know what is happening in all these places, with the consequence now that the neo-colonial project is alive and well. And the tragedy of the situation, as we are talking about the inherited boundaries, is that there is a group of leaders, and perhaps the use of the word leaders is very loose. They are not leaders in the sense that they lead their people toward the right destination. They are leaders because they occupy the positions of president or prime minister, and the people are said to have voted them, and that therefore they are the ones that we look up to. The net effect is that Africa is in dire straits. And some of these conflicts that we see in Africa are manufactured conflicts. Look at the arms industry in Europe, even countries that appear to be innocent on the face of it, like Sweden. If you look at their GDP and the contribution that the arms contribute to their GDP and where those arms are sold, the Soviet Union, Ukraine, even Germany, and all these other countries, of course, the United States of America, Russia, and China, it is Africa that is the theater and at once the market where all these things are sold. And you and me who are Africans, the tragedy is that the political leaders have succeeded in recruiting us either by appealing to our very base ethnic characteristics, with the consequence that even those of us who have had the advantage of exposure and education, whether formal or informal, when we go to our rural villages or to our countries, we think more as Hausa, as Fulani, as Igbo, as Yoruba, as Ovambo, as Ovimbundu, as Venda, as Luos, as Kambas, as Zulus, as Xhosas, as Zagawas, and the net effect is that the continent is in dire straits, and all the predictions that were made by the leaders on the eve of independence has come to pass, which calls into question the quality of the post-colonial leaders that we have had. Part of the problem, and Chinua Achebe of Nigeria, writing in the year 1983 in his little book, The Trouble with Nigeria, which could very well be the trouble with Africa, says of Nigeria, and I dare say that that is true of most of Africa, that the problem of Africa is simply and squarely a problem of leadership. But I add something else, that is also a problem of the quality of followership. In fact, many are the times now that I ask myself whether this thing that you call universal suffrage is what is going to rescue Africa. If you find your typical African voter and you have a conversation with him or her and ask him, why are you voting a particular individual to go into office? The answer would be possibly he or she is from my tribe. He or she is from my clan. He or she has given me some money and I've bought food for my children. And I ask the question, whether in the 21st century, individuals whose reasoning capacity is at that level ought to be allowed to vote and to make decisions as to who should lead them. Easier said than done, and perhaps I do not have a solution, but it calls into question the interrogation of this thing that we call democracy. And our description of democracy is normally jaundiced. And I use the word jaundiced very deliberately because we have been persuaded by Western Europe particularly, and particularly the African who has gone to formal education. He has been persuaded, he or she has been persuaded that democracy as defined by Europe is what democracy is. And how does Europe define democracy? Number one, that you have periodic elections. Number two, that you must have plural politics to mean political parties. And that you must therefore, in addition to that, you must have an electoral system which allows the civil society to function. And if you talk to your typical African, including me and you, that is how we define democracy. But the question that we never pose to ourselves is whether it is possible to run governments in which people are involved in an exercise of selecting or choosing or electing their leaders, which is representative, which is transparent, which allows people to participate, and which is not defined by the European powers or the Western powers or Western political scientists. Is there that possibility? Because what has been demonstrated in Africa in the recent past is that after every election cycle, African countries degenerate into conflict, because the typical African politician also sees political office as a site of material aggrandizement. Some of you call it prebendalism. They go into office on the basis that if I'm from a tribe A, during the period that I'll be the president, the people from my village will then benefit from what we describe as development. They'll have roads, they'll have hostels, they'll have jobs in the civil service, they'll have the opportunity to loot the treasury, and that is what they go into power for. The Europeans have had their own problems over the years, but on average now, in many European countries, and I think the Scandinavian countries of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland are the better examples, people go into public office to serve, and the electorate is also aware that we are electing these individuals for the purpose of service. So that democracy, as I understand it, also presupposes that the electorate have an understanding of what governments are all about. And I'm submitting to you that in Africa as it is now, the electorate is blinded by a number of things, one of which is negative ethnicity, the other one is poverty. And poverty does not allow people to exercise their intellectual firepower in a manner that is beneficial to themselves. So without belaboring the issues, I'm saying that Africa finds herself in a situation which is disturbing. It is disturbing because of the inadequate use of resources. People now hold the view and persuaded by politicians that the boundaries we have in Africa are not sustainable. And this is how you understand the agitation of the people of Tigray. They want their own country. The people of Oromo, they want their own country. The people in Nuba Mountains, they want their own country. The people in Darfur, they want their own country. The people in Ambazonia, they want their own country. The Biafrans want their own country. The Odudua want their own country. The Hausa Fulani want their own country. The Zagawa want their own country. The Arabs want their own country. The Zulu may be looking for their own country. In the Caprivi Strip in Namibia, they may want their own country. The Ovambo may want their own country. The Ovimbundu may want their own country. So that there is a danger that the artificial African state is going to be a theater and a site for conflict over the years until and unless we have men and women who will provide the leadership that will demonstrate to Africa that indeed it is possible to husband these boundaries so positively that we need not divide our little countries. And that is where the voices of people like you and me come in. They come in to persuade Africa that indeed leadership and governance is about the deployment of resources, natural and human, for the sake of ensuring that the quality of people's lives is of such a nature as makes them to realize their full potential. I have always found merit in the words of the American Declaration of Independence. And the reason why I do this is because the United States of America, is largely a settler country after the Caucasians had decimated the aborigines of that land. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, these are the words: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are born equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is for this reason that governments are instituted amongst men. And that therefore it is the duty of the governments to midwife the resources of a nation, both natural and human, in order for people to realize their happiness. And I am persuaded personally that Africa is capable of achieving that. But there are a few things that we must do. Number one, we must decolonize our minds. And decolonization of our minds means that those of you, particularly those of us who have had the advantage of Western education, must not think that we are Francophone. If you go to the countries that were colonized by the French, you meet people who are professors and PhD holders and professionals who think that their default intellectual and political mecca is Paris. And they think they are Francophones. In their witting and unwitting nature, they want to be more French than French. If you go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, you meet people who think that their default position ought to be Belgian. They want to go to Brussels. You go to former British colonies, they call themselves the Anglophones. And therefore, they want to go to England, of course, and to the younger cousin in the United States of America. The same with the former colonies of Portugal, they look to Lisbon. And if you go to Equatorial Guinea, they look to Madrid. And progressively now, we are looking towards Beijing in China. until the day that we are capable of jettisoning that kind of primitive reasoning, Africa is not going to realize our potential. And this is part of my disappointment with the Organization of African Unity, now known as the African Union, which sits in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. If you look at the bureaucrats in that arrangement, they themselves are suffering from mental capture. And the net effect is that when we look at Agenda 2063, where Africa is promising herself from the year 2013 that we are going to be a new continent that has harnessed our resources, and much more recently, when at the beginning of the year we instituted the African Free Continental Free Trade Area, we think that we are going to remove tariff and non-tariff barriers. These are good things. But this is the point in time when Africa needs to revive the spirit of our founding fathers. Today, when I read the 32 speeches that were delivered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, on the 24th and 25th days of May in the year 2063, how I can understand them. I hear all of them, whether it's Nyerere, whether it's Nkrumah, you can see these people could see. And there is a sense in which you want that spirit, the spirit of Nkrumah, the spirit of Nyerere, the spirit of Modibo Keita, the spirit of Kenneth David Kaunda, the spirit of Thomas Sankara, the spirit of Samora Moises Machel. And without belaboring the issue, I want to tell you, my fellow Africans, using the words of the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah, Africa has great promise, but our present circumstances are also very disturbing. We are at a crossroad, and we must be very careful which path we choose. And my own view is, it is not going to be easy, but the beauty is that it's not impossible. We have our challenges of integration, but progressively Africans are beginning to realize that these artificial boundaries only make us weak, and that the sooner we run away from these boundaries, the safer we are. Africans are also beginning to realize that the quality of the leaders that we have stands in the way of our progress. And in this regard, I only have faith in our younger people. And our younger people must be energized to think differently. Their minds must be liberated to think differently. And it's the duty of you and me to make our contribution in that regard. It's not going to be easy. It is not for the faint-hearted. But if we don't do it, once again, the African continent will lose this century. And those who are Afro-pessimists will continue to refer to us as Lusophone, Francophone, Anglophone, and Arabophone. We must stop them. And that is what I wish to share with you this evening. Stay blessed and stay focused. God bless you.
Oh, thank you very, very, very much, Professor Lumumba. Thank you indeed for this input. Very, very much appreciated, as always, you know. So I'm going to call on Professor Godini Darah to please make a response or make a contribution to what Professor Lumumba has just said. So I'm going to please unmute yourself, and then so that you can talk, please. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Edobor. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I would like to join you to show appreciation and thank Professor Lumumba for the erudite and moving speech and the enlightenment that he has shown, giving us a quick run on the African history of the past 60 years. We must thank him for tales that he has supplied from the organization of the 1940s up to the independence decade of the 1960s, and the dreams that the first generation of African leaders, what we can call the nationalists of Africa, the dream that they had of the continent, and the aspirations that they outlined concerning how to turn political independence into economic independence, how to create societies and nations that will now overcome the problem created by colonialism. We are enlightened and inspired by Professor Lumumba's description. I would like to observe that the question of colonial legacy, boundaries, the high number of African nations, 54, 56, as well as what he ended up with that we may refer to as mental and intellectual boundaries, the ideological handicaps that Africans have concerning how to convert the opportunities of independence into the dream that the early nationalists advocated. The point to underscore is that these nations that we have in Africa are truly, as he said, European concepts. It was European powers that defined these countries, that drew the maps, and they defined these countries, assembled the population that will constitute these countries, and drew the maps of these countries in order to suit their own interests in Europe. So we must recognize that the attainment of what Frantz Fanon called flag independence did not terminate the dependency of the African colonies on their former colonial masters. That structure remains. And that structure is the primary reason why the African leaders have not been able to convert independence to freedom, economic emancipation. For example, as Professor Lumumba observed, in many parts of the continent, people are still thinking either they are Francophone or Anglophone or Lusophone, French colonies, British colonies, Portuguese colonies, Spanish colonies, even South African colonies. So this idea of nations that have not been able to realize themselves arise from the very structure of the colonial system and the survival of the infrastructure and the ideology that colonialism imposed on the continent. We can cite the views works of the British anthropologist and journalist Basil Davidson, who wrote the book The Black Man's Burden. That is how Africa has inherited the crisis of the European nation state, and we have not been able to create our own nation state according to our own wish. Now, the second point of importance is Professor Lumumba's very lyrical recollection of the names of those leaders of the anti-colonial movement, which inspired Africa, that gave us hope that we would be able to do what Europe spent 100 years to do, we would do it in a few years. Big names, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Keita, the revolutionary leaders, Frantz Fanon, even Boumediene in Algeria, the counters, the people who clamored for complete anti-colonial and anti-imperialist struggle. What happened? Within a decade of their coming to power, they were the first people that Western nations conspired and eliminated through coup d'etats and so on. The very armies that we inherited from Europe, the armies were turned against us. And within 20 years, that generation has been wiped out. The people who spoke and we rose to listen, none of them survived. And I attribute this to the prolongation of the oppression of Europe on Africa. Well, the question of elections, the elections that look like jokes, like buying power, are also extension of the European system. Democracy, as we define it, as he said, is defined as just periodic elections. Democracy is not periodic elections. Democracy means people being free to select their leaders. Even the selection process, the electoral process, have all been hijacked by what we may call as the agents of neocolonialism. The people who have hijacked this electoral process are the people that Europe liked. Europe does not hate them. Europe hated Nkrumah, they hated Nyerere, they fought Agwi, they fought Awolowo. But all the people who have hijacked African political systems and converted elections to higher purchase, Europe is happy with them, particularly the Francophone and the Anglophone area. In other words, we are still carrying the burden of European colonialism. I share Professor's optimism that a generation will arise that we will not tolerate this. The point to note is that Africa still provides Western democracies and Western economies with its natural resources. Europe and America and the West, including China now, they see Africa as a place where cheap raw materials can be obtained. As long as Africa is seen by these powers as a place where you can go and plunder resources, the problem will linger on for a long time. Do we ever have a point where we can escape? The clamor for ethnic nations is a diversion. The clamor for a Biafra, for an Oduduwa Republic, for a Fulani Republic, they are not the solution. Because those republics, if they are ever created, will replicate the crisis that the present nation states also have. The advocates of those republics who are clamoring for mono-ethnic nations have not given us one blueprint of how they will industrialize those places, how they will eliminate poverty, how they will tackle insecurity, how they will decolonize the educational system, how they will create an economy that is not dependent on Europe. None of the advocates of these ethnic nations, whether Biafra or Duduwa or whatever, none of them has come out with a blueprint on how to emancipate the people they are talking about. They are going to amplify and worsen the conditions of people they are fighting for now. So I don't support the advocacy for ethnic-based nations. The continent has 1,750 languages. It is not possible for Africa to create nations with one language each. It will even multiply the crisis that we have. We will have multilingual nations. We will have nations like Nigeria with about 500 languages. It is the system of governance. And the system of governance must be decolonized. It must be removed from the capitalist exploitation. It must seek the welfare of people as the primary cause of being in government, not acquisition of personal wealth. These were the images that the Nyerere represented for us. These were the images that Nkrumah represented for us. We have to return to those era, that era in which ideology of decolonization and anti-imperialism guided political activity. If we are talking of building an African capitalism, it will endanger our people more, it will create more poverty, it will reduce more people to beggarly conditions. We must think of an ideology that thinks of liberating the people. I think we cannot avoid socialism. Whatever name we are going to give to it, an ideology that says that the welfare of the people is the primary reason for government to exist, and that welfare must not only be a slogan, it must also be structured into political office holding, into political parties, into the way elections are held, into the grassroots mobilization of people, and the removal of money and wealth as precondition for being able to contest for power. The African had those things before colonialism came. We have systems of leadership change, of transitions. We did not require money. You didn't have to go and rob a bank not to be able to have, you didn't have to buy an airplane to campaign. That system still exists on the continent. And our ideologues and intellectuals, as Professor Lumumba advocated, to join their voices to restore this indigenous African system of equity and justice and use it to construct the new nations that Africa will have. I joined Professor Lumumba in wishing, as I said earlier, that generations will arise. And luckily for us, the African continent is made up mostly of young people. They are going to revolt against the existing system that yokes us to the iniquities of Europe, that yokes us to poverty through capitalism, that yokes us to superstitions called Christianity or Islam, whatever you call them. The young people of Africa will, in the words of Lumumba, emancipate and liberate their minds and be ready to rebuild their continent. It's the most endowed continent in terms of resources, minerals, and so on. It's also the most endowed now in terms of the youthfulness of its population. And these are two assets that we are going to utilize to free the continent. It's going to be a major struggle. I see it as like a second anti-colonial and anti-imperialist struggle. For the West and for Europe to leave us alone, it will result in another struggle. It will be a prolonged struggle. But in the end, Africa will unite in the words of Nkrumah, and Africa will be triumphant by introducing and reinventing an ideology of equity and justice, of the goodness of the majority, and removing corruption, capitalist exploitation and plunder, and creating good life for everybody, as envisioned in that American Declaration of Independence, which Dr. Lumumba read now. I have that optimism, but how soon it will come cannot be told. In the early part of Africa's struggle, in the 60s or 70s, there were many people in the world who doubted the capacity of Africa to fight for liberation. But Africa united and fought for the liberation of Southern Africa colonized countries. And let it be on record that the anti-colonial struggle of Africa that yielded independencies in the 1960s, that took about 15 years from the Manchester Conference of 1945 to 1960. That period in history is the fastest anti-colonial movement in the whole universe. The people of Latin America spent 200 years before they gained their independence. In Africa, we did it in about 40 years. We are going to replicate that miracle. And the young people of Africa will mobilize themselves and imbibe the spirit of Pan-Africanism so that those boundaries that seem to be obstacles now. Once you think of economic emancipation, once you are thinking of how to spread education, how to spread affordable transportation, food, the new leaders, you also think of the transport infrastructure that will convey those products and those goods. Once you think of industrialization, we will also think of the infrastructure that will convey the products of those industries to areas where they're needed in Africa. In the 1970s, there was a flash of this in the mind of OAU. And I remember that the ECOWAS movement of the 1970s developed to a point where there was an idea to build a highway from Dakar to Lagos, and from Lagos through Cameroon to through Central African Republic and to Mombasa in Kenya. That idea was mooted in the 1970s. And the road on the Nigeria end was taken from Badagry and is stretched up to Warri, but it's going to Calabar now. It's called East-West Road. African nations are going to embark in those trans-nation infrastructure. And it is when we're industrialized, when we are emancipated through education, and when the wealth of Africa is not now stolen and diverted by its bourgeoisie, when that wealth is meant to feed and improve the life of the African people, it becomes imperative for those structures to come in place. I have the optimism. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Professor Godwin Darah. So that was a very good contribution. By the way, I just wanted to mention, some of you might see that I'm holding my mobile phone. The reason I'm doing so is because my loudspeaker has some issues, which just developed today. So I need my mobile phone to hear what you are saying. That is why I'm holding the mobile phone. So please forgive me. You know,
it's understood.
Can I now move to our Mr. Godwin Etakubuebu to please make his response and contributions to what Professor Lumumba said, you know, as briefly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edobor. I believe you are hearing me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I must thank, let me start from thanking Professor Darah, who has done a tremendous job, of course. He did not go below quality expected of him at any given time. Then I come to Professor Lumumba, who, of course, is too erudite. He's an African of the yesteryears and is going to be an African of tomorrow. So I thank him for that. And Dr. Edobor, I thank you for putting this together. Now, the issue we are discussing today is challenges of intra-Africa. As I was saying, the discussion today is challenges of intra-Africa's integration resulting from her post-colonial partitions and leadership problems. Let me present my own saying that the state nations that are today in Africa, we are not the first to come in, but the problems militating against the state nations of Africa today were in place before ever those state nations were ever mentioned. As much as I agree with Professor Lumumba, with Professor Darah, I want to be very, very peculiar in the few minutes that I have to narrow my own explanation using a specific country and the issues that went wrong. For example, of course, the Anglophone, that phone, they will never help us. One of the reasons we should take as a typical example is just a few years ago, ECOWAS mooted the idea of single currency, ECO. Very, very brilliant idea. Very, very, very brilliant idea. which would have brought us in par with the European Union and the Euro. But what happened? Because the Francophone want a larger entitlement or a larger community for the CFAs, this crumbled, totally crumbled. Why were this very, very, very possible? Professor Darah made a point. Those who granted us the independence, they made sure that the agitators who knew how to turn independence to freedom were eliminated within the first 50 to 20 years of coming into existence of these nation states. And that is why I say, let me take a typical country. I will narrow it to Nigeria. The examples I want to give now, they are purely pulled from the Nigerian narratives. But if you look at it, they have semblances in nearly every other nation in Africa. I will give two examples. The first Europeans to come into Nigeria were the Portuguese, and this was in 1472. The British came in 1552. Now, what was Nigeria when it was referred to as slave coast? Nigeria was a package of entity purchased by traders. And when the charter of that trader, the Royal Niger Company, was revoked, that trader organization sold Nigeria to the British government at a cost, £865,000, or we could call it $1.1 million then. Meaning, Nigeria was a commodity, a product. When the buyers finished with it, they sold it to the government. It was only at that time that government came, that government came to hold this thing proper as government property. Now, between then, okay, let me add this. The sales of Nigeria from traders to the British government was 1899. We all know this. Then something happened. In 1861, when the traders that hold Nigeria together were finding it difficult to collect their taxes, to collect everything they needed, to take the products away with everything, they found some resistance among the aborigines. And in 1861, they wrote a letter to the British government asking for permission to form a police force in order to enforce regulation and order. What was the purpose of that forcing regulation and order? Purely was to be able to obtain taxes and every other thing that will boost the economy, not Nigeria economy. This was granted, and it was granted that they should recruit 30 men. They call them the Consular Guide. And the 30 men were recruited in 1861. The 30 men recruited were organized somewhere at Isaleko, where you call Lagos today, in the island. And they were well trained in military format because that was the request. And they were now set out to do their job. The two operations, the first of all carried out, the 30 men, the Consular Guide, was somewhere in Egbe. 1861, 1862, till today, if you get to the site of the operation in Egbe, you will feel very, very sorry for humanity. They were brutalized. And this encouraged them to ask for more men. In 1863, they demanded that the force should be increased from 30 to 100. And this was granted immediately because the returns of the funds, the taxes and all those were now going very, very fluently. It is here now that the twist that is to characterize Nigeria in future, because as of this time, Nigeria was not in existence, took place. The permission was granted to increase from 30 to 100. And when the permission arrived, those to make the recruitment did not recruit these people within the eco zone as they did with the 30. They traveled to hinterland, which probably today would result that traveling up north. And they went away for months. Then they recruited the 70, all the 70 from there. And immediately they came back to Lagos, they traded them at the same spot in Eku, in Lagos. But what happened? The name changed from Consular Constabulary to Hausa Constabulary. That became this. Let us mark that. Then the amalgamation of 1914 that brought the South and the North together, what actually was responsible? There are evidences now that the Southern Protectorate and the Northern Protectorate, they were not at par in trade. Each year, there is deficit budget accruing from the Northern Protectorate, whereas the Southern Protectorate was in surplus. This now led to affirmation that in 1911, the North, the loss from there became 370 pounds. The following year, 1912, the thing moved to almost 700 and something pounds. Then in 1913, it has now moved to 1,750 pounds deficit. This prompted the British to say, no, we cannot run this like this. Let us do something. So let us bring both together, and the efficiency that is here, we use to manage whatever deficiency that is here, so that our profits can be continually without being tampered with. This became the issue of the amalgamation. That was after Flora had given the name Nigeria. The question is this: was the packaging of the two units to become one for the interest of the people of the aborigine or the people of the zone? The answer is no. It's purely for the economic benefit of the colonialist. And what British did, most others, either French or what, they did it in most cases. Now, I zero down to what Professor Darah said, that those who gave the independence, they cut out those who were fighting for the independence. They knew the straightforward agitators who would want to pay any price to make sure that they will get independence and turn independence to freedom for their people. Then there is an argument now that total independence will come if it becomes total freedom for the people of the area of this zone. How will the colonialists be benefiting continuously and continually? So in their release or granting of independence, they had a few things and they planted a few things that will make sure that there will be perpetual acrimony, perpetual disagreement. Then they would always be returning as the godfather. And by that doing, they will assess the economic benefits, which was the purpose of exploiting around the world. So this is what we have today. Now, I will put it this way. I share the enthusiasm of Professor Lumumba. I agree with Professor Darah to the extent that he said that the battle is going to start and is going to take a larger dimension of bringing our vision to reality. If you look at Nigeria today, Professor Lumumba mentioned the Igbos that want to go, the IPOB, the Oduduwa, the people of Niger Delta, the Middle Belt Forum, even the Up North is not a unified one. The Fulani are becoming differently from the outsiders now. They want to go. Would this give us the benefit of what we want? No. Because until it is actually proved that people who really want to fight, who fought for independence, the reincarnation of those people, not in terms of coming back to life through the normal process of birth, but people taking their spirit and standing up that this is where we go, so as to transform independence to freedom. And the freedom must be economical, must be financial, must be geographical, must everything. the greatest enemy against this movement are still the colonialists. So what the African nation should be looking at very seriously. When BRICS, that is British, China, Russia, and all of them, and South Africa joined them, making 5. It was a good hope. But today, those equally fighting against this are people that were the colonialists and extension of the colonialists. So we need new breed of Africans, people who would say, if I perish, I perish. We need the Thomas Sankara to rise again. We need the Kwame Nkrumah to come back to life. We need the Julius Nyerere to return back in whichever format. Until this is done, we will not get anything much to achieve for what we anticipate to arrive. That city where our aspiration is, will not be able to achieve it. But because of recent around Africa, some of the younger generation leaders, they were the ones who have delved into terrible things. So, but we need to move these people to emulate the places of finance that's taking dominion over our mentality. Because we should remember that our forefathers, like Professor Darah said, our forefathers at a time were giving justice. They understood democracy even than we do now, with that money manipulating them. But today, the whole world has been put under financial enslavement. So if we can go this way, it's not going to be an achievement that we will be accounting for and taking the credit for tomorrow. My fear is that, of course, like in Nigeria, I keep saying it, Nigeria shall be great and Nigeria shall lead, but it might not be my time. But the little we can do now, let's do it together so that our children, our next generation will be able to achieve that. Because the energy we are wasting in the wood now is so much that even if we come out of the wood, where will be the energy to walk the road, where we achieve the road? But I am so sure that Africa can rise and Africa will dominate. And that is my submission this afternoon. I salute.
So thank you very, very much, Mr. Etakubuebu, for this wonderful contribution. So I will move on now fast to Dr. Agwi. Can you please unmute your microphone and then turn on your video if possible, so that we can also see you and make your brief contribution, as brief as possible, please.
So I would like to remind everyone that our topic for today is the challenges of intra-African integration resulting from her post-colonial partitions and leadership problems. A lot has been said already about the post-colonial partitions. I would like to stay on the part of leadership problems, challenges which we have in Africa. But before I do that, I would like to express my gratitude and thanks to Professor Lumumba for gracing this occasion. For his, ever since I've heard his speech some 3 years ago, I've been a fan of his, and I'm very, very much privileged to be in the same, or to be in the same panel with him. So, Professor, thank you very much for your insight. We believe that your work is still on, and we will follow you and also help to raise awareness about our issues in Africa and how we can bring that unity and progress. Thank you very much. I also like to thank Professor Darah for his insight, and also Mr. Etakubuebu. I hope I got the name correct. Thank you all. We welcome you to Roundtable Conference. So, our leadership challenges is one of the issues I see that why Africa has not moved forward after all these years. Because instead of us looking inwards, we always look outwards. That is where this, as Professor Lumumba said, that is where this mentality, inferiority complex syndrome is coming from. Because I was just talking about the brain drain, the mental inferiority complex which we have in Africa, which has been affecting us, does not allow us to grow or to do things that we will do to bring development and unity to our continent. And some of that issues, like I said, is we should look inwards. Inwards is where the solution is when I'm talking of inwards, I'm talking about our tradition. What are the African traditions we have before? How does it work before Europeans came? Before the colonial, pre-colonial time. So how do we govern ourselves? Why don't we research on that and find out ways which we can incorporate into the modern time to help us? Because we have seen that democracy as prescribed by the West has not worked in Africa. I mean, a lot of people, we elect a lot of people who have no common interest or no interest to do anything to develop the people. So we have to look into that. And we have to look into history. History itself, like I said, is one of the ingredients which one uses to determine the future. And unfortunately, in some countries, most especially Nigeria, I know of, there's no more, they don't teach history, or they have started now, I don't know, but they have eradicated history. So how can such a country develop when they don't know their history? They don't know what the mistakes they have done, the good things they have done in the past, so that history will enable us to assess and take only the good things which we know that brings development, and they keep repeating it. And instead, those that will not bring development, we reject it. So history should be a part of African development, and will bring to bring peace and unity to Africa. Then I would like to talk of the manpower, brain drain. That is what is happening now. That is why all our brilliant minds are outside of Africa. So what is their mission? Is it to bring knowledge back, or to stay away from Africa? That should, the African Union should look into that thoroughly and find an incentive to bring these people back. We need them in order to develop our continent. So whatever it is, there are many people who are using the diaspora to bring the development to their country. And a good example of that is China. China was able to use the diaspora, the Chinese diaspora, to bring development very fast, transfer of technology, I will come to that, to their country. The Indians have done the same. So why is an African an exception? So these are the things, that is where this mentality, inferiority complex I'm talking about is really at play. If we know how to tap into the diaspora community, diaspora professional gains, then we know it will help us a lot to develop our continent and bring peace and unity to all. So another thing I would like to say that is affecting the unity and the peace in Africa is continuity and long-term planning. Unfortunately, I don't know about any other country apart from Nigeria where I'm from, but long-term planning seems to be out of the books. And I don't know how a continent, most especially a country, a city, or otherwise can develop without long-term planning. In Germany, where I am, they plan for 30 years, 50 years ahead. And irrespective of the government that comes to power, the bureaucrats, they continue this execution of these plans. So why is it in Africa we have uncompleted projects, abandoned projects, all these things? These are a lot of money being wasted. And if there's no continuity, I can bet you we'll hardly talk of anything like progress in Africa. So I would like the conference to look into that in future, how we can bring about continuity and long-term planning to our infrastructure development plan. Then we could talk about transfer of technology. I've talked about that one a little. Transfer of technology, now we don't need to start all from the scratch again. The technology is there. Within Africa, we are blessed with a lot of natural resources, including human resources, brilliant brains, one of the best in the world. So why can't we sit down together and see how we can incorporate these people and incorporate and bring back technology to Africa without any much fuse about it. The Chinese have done that. We know that we started development with the Singaporean, the Malaysians, and others. They have left us behind. So what did these people do? Do they have two heads? No. So what did they do? Why isn't it good for we to study what they did that make them to be progressive and try to implement that back home? But that's where I'm talking about leadership. Our leaders are not interested in that. They have other aims, which Prof and others have mentioned, which is more of looting, corruption, and others. So these are the things that we have to look into if we as Africans want to develop and united and also move ahead and be at peace with each other and the world. So I would just like to stop there because of the time. And I thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Agwi, for that contribution. I think if I may just add to what you just said, I think the problem, as Professor Patrick Lumumba and also Professor Darah and the previous speakers all said, the issue is not that technology is the issue. The issue is decolonizing our minds. Most of us who are in Europe, we are as tribalistic as we would be if we were back in Nigeria or in Africa. And when we travel back to Africa, we also fall back to our tribal orientations and wanting to make money. And so the knowledge that we have acquired in the diaspora are never really transferred to Africa. I think that's where the problem lies. It is the partitioning as it causes such mental disorder or psychological problems to the extent that we do not see beyond those tribal and ethnic limitations, to use the word of the previous speakers. I think those are the issues that we have to face. How have those partitioning affected the way we think, our minds, and how can we decolonize our minds? So I would suggest that before we move back to Professor Lumumba and the other discussant panelists, that we take a few questions because of time. Otherwise, we'll just go in a circle. If you all don't mind, I would suggest that we take some questions. You know, anybody from the participants who may have questions to ask, could you please ask that question now so that we can take them? Because we want to keep this as short as possible since we started so late. If you raise your hands, I will see you and I will try to get you onto the system so that you can ask your question personally. So just a minute. There are some shots. Okay. Basically, they are all saying insightful presentations, very insightful, and so on. So there is no question here. So in that case, I would go back to the panelists and ask Professor Lumumba if he wishes to make any statements at this point to what the other gentlemen have said, please. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. Let me say how personally I'm enriched by the intervention that have been made in terms of allowing me to have different perspectives. And I can't agree with you more that going forward, we must recognize that our only path is the path of optimism, which must be informed by the realization that all civilizations have gone through this phase or through these phases. And I think that there are a number of things that are happening in Africa which suggest to me that despite the hiccups that we'll find on the way, there is a sense in which we will realize our ultimate goal. There is something specifically said by one of the colleagues that in Africa, we tend to plan in a very juvenile way. And I'm using the word juvenile very deliberately here. Every person who assumes political office talks about their legacy. In Kenya, for example, where I am now, we have a president who is constantly talking about my legacy, therefore wanting to do things for personal glory. In Europe and America, progressively, that is not the idea. The idea is that you plan for posterity. And that is why the planning period is 30, 40 years. Then you can break it down into 5 years for purposes of effective and efficient implementation. If you look at the Chinese, they are planning for 100 years. But what we must recognize is that the neo-colonial project is alive and well. The good professor talked about the eco, and you saw what the French did. Immediately they recognized that the eco was going to be a currency that was not only going to eliminate the CFA franc, but was also going to form the foundation stone upon which Africa could have a single currency. And just imagine to yourself if international transactions were to be de-dollarized and you have the intervention of an African currency, what that would do to African economies. And you who now have the exposure in Europe and America must make very deliberate efforts to inform processes in the continent of Africa. Easier said than done, because the current dominant leadership in Africa is generally hostile to positive ideas. But yet there is a critical mass that is beginning to appreciate that unless we think differently, decolonize our minds, look at our economies, look at critical areas of agriculture and value addition, Africa is always going to play the second fiddle to other civilizations. So it is critical now that we are alive to certain happenings. I am looking at what is happening in Africa today. In the 1980s, it happened when we had the IMF and other Bretton Woods institutions going into African countries and prescribing a one-size-fits-all prescription for all African countries. Right now, during the COVID period, IMF is back with a bang. They are now telling Kenyans what to do, telling Ugandans what to do, telling Tanzanians what to do, telling Zimbabweans what to do, telling you Nigerians what to do. And you and me know whenever IMF has taken root in any country, that is the beginning of the economic woes for the majority of the people. And we can liberate ourselves from that so that we do not, as a continent, deal with primary products. I see people talking about transfer of technology. If you look at the experiences of countries such as the post-war Japan, post-Civil War South Korea, and the Singapore after its departure from Malaysia, we look at post-war Vietnam. As I speak to you now, Vietnam has taken quite a number of countries in Africa, Cambodia and Laos. Brazil after 1975 with the coup d'etats. It tells you that going forward, we can only deal with our integration and unity when we emphasize the thing that is going to improve, the things that are going to improve the quality of the lives of the people. And this is how Africa Agenda 2063, which is a good, one cannot quarrel with Africa Agenda 2063, because its raison d'etre is to ensure that the standard of the lives of Africans by 2063 is at middle level, which means that we are no longer quarreling about the quality of healthcare. We are no longer quarreling about the quality of food on the table. We are no longer quarreling about education. We are no longer quarreling about whether we are exporting primary products, but we are at a level where we can actually enjoy life with longer life expectancies, in decreased infant mortality and maternal mortalities. And then the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is going to deal with the whole idea of freedom of movement. Somebody talked about infrastructure that was contemplated from Dakar in Senegal to Lagos. But we are thinking about infrastructure which is multimodal, railway and road, that is present from Dakar in Senegal to Djibouti, from Cape Town to Cairo, from Luanda in Angola to Eswatini in Sudan. And we also eliminate visa requirements. And that is how the African Union in Kigali, I think in 2016, came up with the African passport. And then of course, we also deal with other things of tariff and non-tariff barriers, so that if a leather product is made in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, that product can move from Addis Ababa and find its way in Lagos, Nigeria, in Abuja, Nigeria, and is still competitive with a product that is from China. As I speak to you now, in Kenya, we are importing fish from China, and the Chinese fish is still cheaper than fish that is found in Kenya, which tells you that their governments are involved in ensuring that they cushion them against the vagaries of economic and currency fluctuation. These are the things that we must do. And as I conclude, I want to agree with my colleague that suggested that this idea of self-determination is one that must be understood in context. And what is the context? The context is that the assumption that if you break away from your mother country, then all your problems will be solved is misguided. I think that that is dealing with the symptoms rather than dealing with the fundamentals. And we must not, and we must ensure that we liberate ourselves from using band-aid solutions to solving cancerous problems. We've got to get into the basis and the foundations of our problems and resolve them. And you who are in Europe now know how a number of European countries actually were saved by the European Union project. Before the European Union project, the economies of countries such as Italy, Spain, and Portugal, and even Greece were actually on their knees. I know the Federal Republic of Germany does bear the brand of many of the things that are happening in Europe, but there is a sense in which the ability of labor to move from Bratislava in Slovakia to Lisbon in Portugal has its economic advantages. And that is the direction that Africa must move in. And I have no doubt in my mind that Africa has already recognized that there is sufficient information, there is sufficient activity on the ground to tell you that there is movement in that direction. In these early days, the steps may be baby steps, but in the fullness of time, which we must work at, I think Africa will not lose out on the fourth industrial revolution. And the whole idea of the Internet of Things and nanotechnology, this is where the world is going to. And if we embrace it and embrace it intimately, and you who are already in the first world, if you play your role, there is a sense in which we can leapfrog some of the problems that we think are impediments. And Singaporeans have demonstrated to us, the Malaysians have demonstrated to us, the Japanese have demonstrated to us this, and of course the Koreans have demonstrated to us that you don't need to reinvent the wheel, you simply use the technology that exists and customize it, and lo and behold, we can realize the Shangri-La that we all are working towards. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Professor Lumumba. Before I go to Professor Darah, there are just a few questions I would like to put to the panel so that I don't lose sight of them. Okay, there's one question that says, I doubt if, well, it's a statement actually, I doubt if there can ever be technology transfer because the owners of the inventions want to have their advantage intact. I am of the opinion that Africa has enough quality brains for an African technology to solve if there is the willpower. It is time for Africa to look inwards. So, and the next person says, well, thank you to Professor Lumumba, to Professor Darah, to all the panelists. And then it says, I want to ask my question by echoing the thoughts of a young man in Nigeria who, in articulating the problems bedeviling Africa and specifically Nigeria, cited endemic corruption as the core factor. He proffered a radical solution to make mass burial for all public office holders. What is your thought on this approach to our anticipated emancipation and dismantling of the influence of colonialism? So these are two questions that were posted. And now I will go to Professor Darah. So please have a second response and perhaps also look at the questions that have just been asked in your response. Okay, thank you, Professor Darah. If you don't mind to unmute your microphone and then see whether we can activate your video, please. Thank you.
I think we've conquered another technology now.
We can see your nice face now.
The nice transfer of technology now. Yes, I have benefited immensely from the intervention by everybody, the historical interventions, then the facts that have been revealed, especially the new dimensions brought in by Professor Lumumba. I quickly want you to add a little thing concerning the role of the diaspora. I recall that the ideas and movements that facilitated the struggle for independence for Africa, independence from colonial rule, originated from the African diaspora. We recall that it is the Africans, Black Africans, African Americans in the USA, Canada, and in the Caribbean, who were the first to develop continental interest, mobilizing African minds and the minds of the world to see that Africa was free, first after the slave trade, and then from colonial bondage. I recall Sylvester Williams of Trinidad and Tobago developed the Pan-African in 1900, then Du Bois in the US, and they held conferences from time to time. They went to Paris, to all continents to hold conferences. And then, of course, we remember Marcus Garvey and this Back to Africa movement. It was a constellation of all these ideas from 1900 to the 40s that culminated in the Pan-African Congress in Manchester in 1945. And it was done by African diaspora. So it is important for the current generation of diaspora to replicate these revolutionary activities of the African diaspora. Concerning what Dr. Peter said, he was speaking from Germany, that are the African geniuses just escaping from the African continent to settle in other people's continent? That is not the way that the diaspora of Asia did. Just as Lumumba just recalled now, I mean, in Singapore, China, South Korea, they went to America, they went to North America to learn new tricks, to learn technology, and they took them home to domesticate. So I urge the African diaspora, maybe the ones in Germany can start it, to build a continental movement to aggregate all these thoughts and and educate both themselves and Africa about the need for this second decolonization that we have talked about. It is important to globalize the debate and the discourse, because those whom we are fighting against have global networks. Those who are internal enemies and predators, and they also have global networks. And it is important that a movement be established globally that now speaks to the necessity to re-emancipate Africa. And the whole issue of transfer of technology, I mean, it has already been answered. I mean, you learn it and you domesticate it, you digitize it, and there are geniuses everywhere. It's not necessarily transfer, but you replicate the achievements of other nations, and you create the conditions under which it can become part of your own culture. I think there's an advantage now because communication, modern communication, look at what we are doing now. It has taken us months to plan to meet somewhere to do this. See, we are doing it now. It is possible now to mobilize the minds of Africans in diaspora and the Africans of the continent, and by creating platforms that can educate, emancipate, and make people to become committed to the need for Africa to be free from the stranglehold of other continents and march along with other people in the world in freedom, in dignity, with poverty conquered, illiteracy conquered, with all the obstacles about civilization and development all conquered. And a new world will emerge in the next decade ahead, with Africa leading. I'm sure of that.
So thank you very much for that contribution. Before I call on our brother, Mr. Etakubuebu, to add his voice, I would just like to read something that somebody sent. I think this question is, thank you, Professor Lumumba, and so on, all panelists. Please, would you advise strategic citizenship education within African countries in promoting Africa's integration? I think this person is saying that we need to have also this debate in our educational system in Africa, you know, which at the moment is also missing, you know? Yeah. So to what extent would you be supporting that? And then the next question is, do you agree with the essence of late Professor Peter A.K.'s 1975 seminar work, Colonialism and Two Politics in Africa? How does this knowledge translate to sustainable action towards Pan-Africanism and Africa's development and predictability, and when? So these two questions are from Dr. Otanosha. So I'm going to call now on Mr. Etakubuebu. If you can, maybe you may want to address those questions, but this is posted to all the panelists, of course. So if you don't mind, to please unmute yourself and just brief response, please. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. The discussion is becoming more brilliant and more encouraging. I may not be directing my intervention onto those two questions, but I want to put it very briefly that the problem we have on the subject issue we are discussing today, that is challenges of Africa's integration resulting from our post-colonial partitions and leadership problems. I think we've enumerated this adequately from Professor Lumumba, Professor Darah, Dr. Agwi, hope I pronounce it well, yes, and every other thing. Now, for us to achieve the Africa of our expectation, we must return back home. We must return back to ourselves. The development of the ideal Africa we are looking forward to, mostly in this discussion, can never come from outside. It can only come from inside. I love the platform presented by Dr. Darah when he spoke of diaspora many years ago, what he did. Now, because anytime we look outside, like I said earlier, we'll be missing the point and we'll be hitting a desert ground. Let us take another example. The Africa Union talk of one currency at the time, 2019, and I think they gave which year, that by 2023, something should come to life about it. But that is gone, because as we talk now, nothing, no name, no format, no platform, no template is made of that. But we have another good example we should look at, which is a great achievement that has come out of Africa, spearheaded by Paul Kagame of Rwanda. And that is the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, ACFTA, championed by Paul Kagame of Rwanda. This is a project that has taken off now and is making good success, even at the beginning point. It means, therefore, that if we resolved to make it work, it will work, and the Africa of our dream will come to be. But a fact needs to be established here. There are some leaders in Africa today that can never be part of that good dream. Because like as I said earlier, the colonialists from beginning planted things, removed some, planted some, in order to make sure that the person with the idea thing will never metamorphosed. So for that reason, if we take the example of the success of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is now on top of it, and what additional the president of the Africa is doing, it means there is hope. But this hope we can only develop this hope from eternal penetration. We need to tell ourselves, we need to move it. Like as Professor Darah said, the issue of transfer of technology, the technology is here and there. What people do, you bring it to, you adapt it to your situation and your condition, you add one thing, you remove one thing, then it becomes what you need to move your own economy forward. Then somebody spoke, I was just reading it here now as we're talking, that whenever we have governments that concentrate, that betrays the process of electioneering, the meaning of democracy is destroyed. We cannot get it. Somebody mentioned it earlier on, that our forefathers, they did things in their own way. And there was no place for money, for the money bag to buy things away. So if we come and identify ourselves, I will keep on referring to the president of Rwanda. Today, that place is a very, very good site. Taking in that this is a country that's just coming out of the Holocaust, so to say, it means we can do it. But doing it means we have to identify like minds. As long as our attachment to our colonial masters are still in existence, we will never be able to make it, to achieve it. We will never. We have to detach ourselves from that, because most leaders we have today, they are leaders that have been colonized. Their idea of what to do next, which bed to sleep next, they discuss with their allies. Who are the allies they call? They are most of the colonial masters. And they will come to dethrone what is being genuinely put together by the few sincere ones. And I will add this. We don't need a multitude to change situations of life. We need a few dedicated people of the same mind. But the few that are determined, once they do it, they have to detach from external influence and come internally, identify ourselves, then we arrive at that situation. Then finally, laws that are stringent can curtail excesses. But how will the laws be stringent when in most houses in Africa, what we have, I want to please beg Professor Lumumba to allow me to use his language. What we have are horrible members, not honorable members. What we have are people graduating from stealing 1 million to stealing billions, and now 2 people can even steal 1 trillion, I'm talking in terms of naira, and share it. So therefore, these laws that are being expected to be dished out, to be stringent enough to curtail our excesses, and are being expected to come from those houses, using again the word of Professor Lumumba, houses of membership. What we have, most cases, they are dealers, they are not leaders. And as long as we have horrible members, as against honorable members, this thing will be difficult. But the younger generation that will take this risk, because my generation, I belong to the Wole Soyinka generation, which is called expired or aspiring generation. I think Professor Gigi Darah is there, hearing this, and most of us are that generation. The younger generation should wake up and look internally and motivate themselves to come to achieve by doing what will be beneficial and be benefit to the African population, not necessarily as laid down from Europe, from Asia, from America, and from elsewhere. If we can go like this, I believe that the next generation may want to come out of the wood.
Well, okay. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Etakubuebu, for that intervention. Before we move on to Mr. Dr. Agwi, I would just like to have 2 more questions. One is from Hawa Osotu Oshafu, and she asked, how do we bring about the question of oneness in Africa? When we talk of African integration, we have to also talk about how to come together somehow and discuss more of our oneness that will separate us. She is asking this question on behalf of her father, Hassan Oshafu. And then there's another question here, which I think is controversial, but I'm going to read it as the moderator. We can look at the effect of ethnicity and religion as it affects integration in Africa. For example, Islam is seriously influencing the unity in Nigeria. For example, this is what the questioner, the person has written. I'm only just reading this out. When a sitting president will only want to appoint only persons from his ethnic and religious background to head or parastatal in government, how can this lead to oneness and unity in Africa? So these are 2 additional questions that I would just like to add to the debate. So I will now call on Dr. Agwi to kindly unmute himself and then respond. If you wish, you can also try to address these questions. And if not, then you can just add your own contribution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Edobor. Yes, I would like to take the first question, which is how do we bring about the question of oneness in Africa? Well, that is a very philosophical question, but I will start with this. What you don't have, you cannot give. You can only give what you have. So if oneness, I understand you're talking about us loving each other, respecting each other. And that we can only generate if within ourselves we have love, if within ourselves we have peace. And how do we have peace? How do we have love? It goes back now to all those things we have discussed in this forum. which is somebody who is hungry, somebody who is sick and does not have treatment, and somebody who is lost, who has lost hope, can never be an ingredient of peace or oneness in Africa. So for us to attain that, in order for us to become one, is we have to start at a very local level with each other. Our values, as we have it in Africa, we have lost it. There's no more values. I remember when I was growing up, if I see a kobo on the street, that is a coin, I don't have the right to pick it. Or even if I pick it, I have to bring it to my parents. But nowadays, people bring 1 million, 500 million, 1 billion home, and nobody asks them any question. Instead, they are glorifying some, they are giving chieftaincy titles. So what good example are we setting for others? With these people or those children who are seeing these type of people, will they love, will they bring oneness to Africa? No, they will never do that. So that is on the micro level of finding oneness. Then on the other level of governmental, is every government must have a program. That is my own view. A program that will bring about integration, a program that will bring about development. Like Professor Darah has mentioned about this national infrastructural development. These are the things that will bring us one. If we have roads, express road leading from one country to the from south to north of Africa, from east to west of Africa, you see that the movement of labor is free, just like one of the panelists has mentioned. It's all these things helps to bring about integration. It helps us to grow as one. If we remember the problem we had with in Nigeria in early 80s about Ghana must go, all those experiences were bad, and we have learned from history. And I think also those countries like Ghana is trying to implement such things again, should look into it and know that it's not a good policy. So we should allow free movement of labor. That will bring unity. But then the question is, if people are hungry and they don't have job, will they allow other people to come to their country? Of course not. This will bring conflict and tyranny again. So in order to do that, there must be a plan. Like I said before, the government must have a long-term plan of achieving integration of Africa, of bringing us as one. So the plan must be up to 30, 50 years in making or in implementation, and broken down, like Professor Lumumba has said, into segments of 5 years, 3 years for implementation purposes. If we go with that plan with a good public awareness information, I believe we're able to achieve that oneness. Education also is one thing. People should be allowed to go to other countries to learn. In that way, they will know the culture and and how things are being run there. So these are some of the things you see. An example of that is the European Union. European Union, now you see there is movement of labor all over Europe. And you see, Professor has also mentioned, when the other countries were in crisis, like Italian, Greeks, Spain, and others, they rallied around, the others rallied around to help them. And that was able to quench any type of a crisis that must arise from one region and affect the other. So on the governmental level, you have these plans which are just enumerated, but also on the personal level, we have the plans of trying to have a value system reinstated again in our culture. So that is that. And then I'll move to the second. I'll just say something briefly on the second one, which is, I will read again. It says, can we look at the effect of ethnicity and religion as it affects integration in Africa? For example, Islam is seriously influencing the unity in Nigeria. For example, when a sitting president will only want to appoint only persons from his ethnic and religious backgrounds to head all the parastatals of government. Yes, like I said in my first presentation, ethnicity has ever been so in Africa, but it was more or less of diversity that brings unity and progress. But now it has turned the other way around, and people who commit a lot of crimes, mostly looting and others, you see that even their countrymen or ethnic men, they go to try to save them from the from the rule of law. So we see that it's not ethnicity itself is now very, very negative in terms of development. It has, in Africa, it has turned to my turn. So you see some ethnic groups, they are waiting for their turn to loot, to come to the government and loot. And that is exactly what is happening, not only in Nigeria, I think in Kenya and other countries, I know from my friends I speak to, that they have all this type of problem. So ethnicity itself and religion is something that is affecting our development. But then how do we go about that? That the answer I can say is that we should go back to where we started. The problem is that we left a good cause. Like I said, when we were growing up, there was this stringent enforcement of values on us. We don't bring home money that we don't, and we cannot prove where the money, the source of that money from. And we don't buy things or build houses when we know we don't have any known income. All these things are the values they should bring. And people who are looting the government, they should not be praised. Instead, their place should be in the prison. So, and in terms of using the ethnicity in terms of, or religions in terms of position, I think it's also a bad thing. We can see from the current state in Nigeria now, where certain tribes are heading all the security parastatals. And what happened is that is my own way of examining the situation, is that people are afraid to touch these ethnic groups, fearing that if they do that, they will have some repercussions in their job positions. I think that is just the basic thing, because if somebody commits a crime and you know it's from one ethnic group, and you are afraid to proceed that crime, because persecute that plan, because you are afraid all the bosses in the parastatals are from that ethnic group, and then you see that we have problem. So those are the things I believe. I don't know how we come about that, because in Nigeria, by its constitution, we have this federal character system. I remember even when we were going to school, when we pass a certain grade, they will not take us, because they have to allow other people from other tribes or ethnic groups to occupy that position. So we from the south, we were making a lot of sacrifice so that the people from other parts, or most especially from the north, were able to come up. So what happened to that system, that federal character system, which was incorporated into I don't know, in our constitution and others? Why was it neglected? Why is it that now all the parastatals heads are from one religious or ethnic groups? We can see the effect of that in our society today. We see a lot of crimes, a lot of killings, lootings, and others going on in the country. So I think we are not yet lost. It's just that people have to recognize that such a problem exists, and they should stop and look back and come back to the table and find a common solutions that will bring Nigerian unity. I can bet you, if there's a government that look out for the people and for the people, I don't think all this agitation for separation will not be there at all. I think people are just frustrated. They don't know how to go about things again in Nigeria. So this agitation for separation is more or less calling on the government, listen, we are here. We need your help. Help us. So I think the government should look at it that way, instead of sending in military and the tanks and the guns. They should instead send in people to talk to the people and sending a lot of development in this area to help them. So I would like to stop there and give my other panelists opportunity to contribute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Agwi, for that contribution. I would do the following. I think I can see that some people have raised their hands. If you don't mind, I would like to see if I can get two persons to make their questions directly. I would like to call on Dr. Chief Ambassador Dr. Camillus Konkwo to please unmute his microphone and ask his question directly. So you are now switched on to the system. Unmute your microphone and your audio, your video, so that we can see you as you talk. Okay, so over to you. You have a question to ask. We are not hearing you. Can you unmute your microphone? Chief Dr. Camillus Kunkwo. Okay, we are not hearing you. So I'm going to take somebody else. Mr. Alfred. So let's see whether it works for you. Can you unmute your microphone and your video and then start talking, please?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Professor Lumumba. Thank you, Professor Darah. Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you, everybody. My question has to do with the new leadership that is coming up in Africa. We are grateful for the new bloods and fresh brains that are coming on. But the question is, how do we align these two, this new group, with the old generation, what we call the analog generation of leaders, who have held on to power for so many years and have bluntly refused to relinquish power? That's why, in fact, they know themselves that their productivity and creativity has dwindled to less than zero level. They don't have anything new to offer. They have nothing new to offer Africa. Yet they are clinging to power, and some of them are even handing over to their own children. How do we align this? How do we align this new generation with the old blood that have held Africa down for a long time? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other person who has raised his hand? Just a minute, so I don't just overlook anybody. I'm sorry, just 1 minute, please. Okay, Madam OTIMB, you can now unmute and speak.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I thought I wasn't going to be given I had to write it. My question is this: one of the challenges in Africa is lack of political will to implement laws put in place by leaders. The question is it the ex-colonialists, or rather Europeans, that stops leaders from doing the needful, from providing quality education, for instance, good transportation systems? Now, is it the influence of colonial masters that stops even us from having quality followers? For example, as a Nigerian, I will take the issue of Nigerians. We have leaders who have been in power for many, many, many years, but the situation of the common man remains the same. The nitty-gritty just needs something small as provision of education, quality education for the poor man, for the masses. Is it the colonial masters that stops our leaders from putting such good quality education in place? Simple as that. That's my question.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Oti. Very good question. So I'm going to take the last person so that we don't just overdo this. Alexander Osarugwe, you can now ask your brief question, please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity given to me to actually ask my question. But actually, my question has been asked before, but I just felt like the panelists have not actually paid special attention actually to it. And I wrote right in the chat that I want to ask my question just to echo the concern of a young Nigerian who, in articulating some of the problems, that we're faced in Nigeria, and he actually pointed to endemic corruption in the system. And one of his radical proposal was to have a mass burial of all public officials or representatives whatsoever. So my question is, in kind of going away from this colonial mindset that we've already inherited and is not making us move forward. Could this be a part of the solution? So what are the perils of this kind of solution? Is it a solution by itself? So I really want to hear the thoughts of Professor Lumumba on this. And at the same time, I want to also see what the other panelists are also saying about such kind of, let's say, radical approach. Thank you, sir.
If I understood you correctly, you are saying that they should all be murdered or arrested and killed or something. Because when you say mass burial,
yeah,
people have to be dead before they can be buried.
Yeah, I think maybe the young man is just trying to think about the Rawlings approach, okay, and to kind of use it in Nigeria. Okay. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And now we will move on. This is now the final round of the panelists, and our dear Professor Lumumba and our other dear discussants and panelists to just respond to the questions that have been asked and your last statements before we round up the evening discussion. Thank you so much for your patience, all of you. So Professor Lumumba, if you don't mind to just make your final statements and then taking the questions that have been asked into consideration in answering in your statements, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think most of the questions are very useful. And in responding to those questions, we must recognize that there are no easy options. Corruption is endemic. You who are from Nigeria will know that corruption has been has had a debilitating effect on Nigeria. You know, the Abacha loot, and Abacha is just emblematic of the problem. But I think that some drastic action ought to be taken. Jerry Rawlings tried to do this in Ghana. What is being suggested that you subject people to that kind of rough treatment, you eliminate some of them. But there are different methods. One of the things that we must do is to hit the corrupt where it hurts most, to ensure that we seize their property. You Nigerians will know, for example, I think James Ibori, I think, whose loot has nothing has happened to him in Nigeria. He was jailed in the United Kingdom, but at home, nothing happens to him. He even seeks and succeeds in occupying office. So there is a sense in which in Africa, we tend to tolerate corruption. And the net effect is that individuals seek public office, not to serve, but to use public office for acquisition of material wealth. And that is not confined to Nigeria. We see it in Kenya during this COVID period. We have seen how bureaucrats and politicians have stolen. And until they are punished, and punished visibly and effectively, corruption will remain an albatross around our necks. I agree with you, therefore, that there is merit in dealing with corruption very firmly, seizing the wealth, ensuring that these individuals don't participate in public activities for the rest of their lives, and ensuring that those who benefit within their family and circles are punished. I don't believe in the death sentence, but I believe that they should be jailed for life. The question of political will is closely associated with corruption. The reason why we have individuals going into public office in many African countries is because they don't want to serve. They simply want to engage in activities that will benefit them. That is why on average, every politician in many African countries has a flat in London, or one in the United States of America, or in the United Arab Emirates. And unfortunately, because this goes unpunished, we then suffer. Because in order for them to build what they do, it means that some road is compromised. It means that some school is not built. It means that some hospital is not equipped. And the tragedy and the irony at once is that these individuals, when they are sick, including your own president, they go for treatment in the United Kingdom, including not only your president, in Cameroon and other places. So there is a sense in which it is completely tragic that we find ourselves in such a situation, but Africans are beginning to wake up. Africans are now beginning to associate their poor quality infrastructure with corruption. For a long time, we were not making that connection. And I hold the view that is not going to be long before we begin to punish this individual. Sometimes we judge ourselves very harshly. Remember that the oldest African country since we regained independence is Ghana, which is slightly over 60 years. If you think about these things and relate it to your lifetime, you'd be frustrated. I no longer think like that. I think intergenerationally. I think about 200 years from today. So what contribution you and me are making now, the fruits of it will not be seen even by your children. It may be seen by your grandchildren. What you should do is to make your contribution. Otherwise, if you think that there'll be instant coffee solutions, you'll be frustrated and frustrated very sadly. But as I conclude, Africa has also demonstrated that it can deal with certain things very effectively. Look at Tanzania. Tanzania has 136 tribes, but through the efforts of somebody like Julius Kambarage Nyerere, that country recently, when they lost their president, you see how smooth the transition was. They did not worry about religion, because we must also distinguish Islam. There is nothing wrong with Islam as a religion, or Christianity as a religion, or Hinduism as a religion. But there is what I call political Islam, or the politicization of religion for the purposes of achieving short-term political goals. It is the duty of those who are clergy in Islam or in Christianity or any other religion to demonstrate by what and did that they are not privy to this particular political Islam. It is one of your former president, not one of the most illustrious, but Sani Abacha, who said that if an insurgency lasts for more than 24 hours, it means the government is involved. And that was a very powerful statement that Nigerians should remember. If an insurgency lasts for more than 24 hours, the government is involved. And it's not only in Nigeria, we see it in different parts of Africa. So going forward, I am personally I'm not pessimistic at all. I'm optimistic. I can see the signs. We only talk about the negatives, but I see good things happening in Malawi now. I see certain good things happening in Namibia. I see good things happening in Tanzania. I see good things happening in a country that is not recognized by anybody in Somaliland. I see good things happening in Rwanda. And all these things we can build on. And it is the duty, as I conclude, you in the diaspora. I think it is the good professor, and I may be wrong about who said it, but he said, go back to history. I think it's the chief who said it. Look at the role that the diaspora played in this particular struggle. I work in Africa. My foundation is present in 38 African countries and 40 countries outside of the continent. I work with young men and women. And I can tell you that these young men and women, they are Liberians, they are Nigerians, they are Ghanaians, they are Gambians, they are Tunisians, they are Malawians, they are Angolans, they are Madagascans, they are Cape Verdeans, and they speak with one voice. Most of them I've never met them, but they are working and they are raising critical questions to their governments. So beyond the talk, there are also things that we must begin to do, and that is our contribution. So ladies and gentlemen, we must conclude on a positive note that this continent has its own hiccups. The problems we have are not unique and exclusive to us. As I speak to you now, many of you can see the problems in Colombia, in Chile, in Argentina, in Peru. that demonstrates to us that problem is everywhere. You can also see what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in Belarus, what is happening in Myanmar, what is happening in Bangladesh, what is happening in Indonesia, and what is happening in that part of the world. It is not true that problems are uniquely African. It is how we deal with them. And I'm convinced that we are on the right trajectory. There are over 200 million Africans in the diaspora. If the spirit of service to the continent is awoken in your minds and hearts, you can make a monumental change. In other words, the population of Africans in the diaspora is almost as large as the population of Nigeria. And the beauty of those of you who are outside of Africa is that you have skills and exposure, which we in the continent may not have. And we want you to bring that to bear in an organized fashion so that you can begin to influence processes. It can be done and it must be done.
So thank you so much, Professor Lumumba, for that statement. I think ending this conversation of tonight in positive notes is the way to go. And before I move on, Professor Darah, just 1 minute, please.
Okay,
just
okay,
1 minute, Professor Darah. Okay, Chief Dr. Okonkwo, go on, please. Ask your brief question.
Actually, I do not want to bring us backwards. Everybody has had a wonderful discussion. I just want to say a very warm thank you to Professor Lumumba. He has been excellent as always. And I'm really, really thrilled by his emphasis on the need to decolonize the mind of Africa from their colonial meccas, that is the Anglophone, Paris, and the Anglophone with London, and Francophone with Paris, and so on. So that was a very, very, very important point he has made there. He has also pointed out that Africa is pregnant with a lot of opportunities, but also pregnant with a lot of challenges. And there is this need that to create infrastructures for the emancipation of African countries from their respective colonial meccas, as mentioned by a lot of discussants and panelists. But Africa struggles to convert independence and into emancipation and freedom, while the colonial makers and the colonial masters, previous colonial masters, struggle to sustain the stranglehold on Africa. We've seen how the African countries within the African Free Trade Continental Agreement project, they're struggling to create a currency that could unite them. And we could see the role France was playing there in the effort to sustain that stranglehold and disintegration of Africa, while Africa is trying to achieve some intracontinental integration. So a question would be, how do you see any strategic option, Professor Lumumba, for resisting the countervailing effort of neo-colonialists to sustain that stranglehold? I think this question has also been asked maybe several times, but maybe you can very briefly emphasize on the availability of any strategic option for resisting this effort of the colonial masters, previous colonial masters, to sustain the stranglehold on Africa. So that would be it. Thank you very, very much, Pro Jones, for giving me the opportunity. And I'm sorry for the technical hiccup that took place a moment ago. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Okonkwo, Chief Dr. Okonkwo. Okay, I think basically all the people that we were going to get in to ask questions have done so or make comments. I think that question was directed to Professor Lumumba, but before he probably might want to address that finally, let me move on to Professor Darah to make his final statements, and Professor Lumumba will then have the final word to take whatever questions or whatever additional statements he wishes to make. So Professor Darah, please, thank you for your patience and for waiting. Can you please now unmute your microphone again and address the issues that have been raised, please? Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, okay, perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Edobor. Some of the questions really cannot be answered today because they require long reflection to obtain the dimensions. But I'm very happy about the question, the tough question raised by, I think, OT and EAB concerning the point that we seem to be criminalizing European colonizers and passing the buck, that all the problems that are afflicting Africa, we seem to be transferring them to the colonial masters. And she asked a very pertinent question, whether it is the same European colonial masters that are stopping Africa, or African leaders, from providing good quality education and public services. It's a very pertinent question. I think that it is not correct to say that all the problems that the continent is going through now are the consequences of the intrigues and wickedness of the colonial masters. Although we have established the point that many of the leaders that we have now are actually products of colonial ideological orientation and the way they think and the attitude to the accumulation of wealth and the use of elections to deceive and collude. All these things have their roots in the colonial system that we underwent. But I think that her question requires more sober reflection. And my own response to it is yes, the challenge of the inability of African leaders to provide good quality education or good quality healthcare or public welfare schemes may be traced to the kind of economy that we run. And the answer, the response to it, in my own view, is that the new leaders of Africa that will salvage the continent would need to put forward revolutionary programs on education, on morality, on probity, on equity. For example, there must be a law or laws that put a bar on how much a public officer can own, how much property, how much wealth. There must be conditions. Anybody who crosses that position becomes corrupt. And there are countries in the world doing that. I don't think people in China can embezzle public money and go scot-free. So we must put out revolutionary programs that outline how public officers should behave, and when they cross the red line, which kind of penalties should be on them and who is to execute that penalty. The option of Jerry Rawlings of Ghana of 1979 so is dramatic, and but it's not an option that we can recommend for every country, that once some people are found to be corrupt, then they should be executed. They do this in other countries, but even if you execute and you have not created a structure that makes corruption a sin, a mortal sin, you will still have more corrupt people. So I urge that the new leaders of Africa, the younger generation that are going to emancipate the continent, must think in revolutionary ways in their morality and in their ethics. And prevent people, and if they do, the penalties could be as harsh as execution, as done by Jerry Rawlings. But a program or programs have to be put out that people would learn from and know that there are limits to what they can do. Different from what is happening in Nigeria now, which is a capitalist cesspool of corruption, where anybody can grow as much as they can. People of 10 years can become billionaires, and there are no questions asked as to how they accumulate the money. We cannot go on this way. The rest of Africa cannot imitate this one. We need to put a bar at what individuals can accumulate, how many houses you can have, and how much property you can own. And not just for public officers alone, for all citizens of the country. Then a new morality can be developed from there. Do not take automatic effect, but I think at a point, people will not know what to avoid and which areas to display egalitarian and equalitarian tendencies. That is my response, Dr. Jones. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot.
So thank you very much, Professor Darah. So thank you very much for that contribution and that response. So Mr. Etakubuebu, if you don't mind to also make it brief, because we are now rounding up, So thank you so much also for your patience. And if there's any way you want to respond to those questions that we asked, please do so, or just your final words, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for everyone. I would always make it brief because I'm very, very cautious of time. Now, Professor Darah spoke very, very well. Professor Lumumba spoke, Dr. Agwi spoke. Let me start by talking about the analog generations of leaders. The analog generation of leaders. Somebody in football, we've been told, I've never been a footballer in my life. I was not even asked as a child to sit by the field side to pick the ball that is going outside the field. So, but we've been told that no good coach would change a winning team. That is very, very key for continuity of success for that coach and the team. But if a team is not performing well, why? You must change the team, change the individual, or change whatever you want to change. Where is this coming into analogy in what we are discussing? The analog generation of leaders make me, Dr. Edobor, to streamline and zero down to Nigeria, which is the typical example of where I spend all my days on I travel around, but all my days, and I will remain here until I pass on into eternity. We have fourth generations of leadership, at least today in Nigeria. The first thing is this: what is the positions of the laws that we ask to govern access with? In a world that we had moved from analog into digitalization, including electronic electionary processes, what do we have? The recent judgment that started from the Court of Appeal to Supreme Court on the Etakubuebu versus Buhari, PDP versus APC, on the recent election of 2019, we are told, and the court admitted this, that the process was analog. The process was analog. And we should not forget that a few months to that election, bills were done and they were approved by the National Assembly. The National Assembly passed them over to the presidency for president asset. The president said, no, it was coming too close to the election day because there would be confusion. And that was a law that could have eliminated analog. That could have been a law that would have brought electrical transmission and everything. We could have moved into digitalized era. But because that bill was not signed, and INEC, the one with the powers to prove that this came to say, no, we did not go with electronic, it is the analog we use. The question is this: we had gone almost 2 years now. Yes, 2 years exactly, after that election result had brought people in. And don't forget, Musa Yar'Adua was the first, Shehu Yar'Adua was the first president of Nigeria that said that the process that brought me to power is faulty. He set up a panel to look at it, other justice ways. But 2 years after the analog had returned people to offices, have we seen any improvement by bringing new laws and the presidency asserted to them? It means we will remain in that analog. What does this portray? It portrays that analog will continue. That is number one. How do we deal with that? There is a book I read, written by a member of the American SEAL that pulled the trigger that killed Osama bin Laden. It says, no easy day. The only easy day was yesterday. When with the Nigeria populace that is controlled by the younger generation moving above 50%, now rise up against their elected members who are the legislators to say, no, you must move and we must get this. So as long as the formula they play now is the winning team that can give individual billions overnight and nothing will happen, is the winning thing that the president, the executive will pad the budget, then the legislature will insert, and the legislature is supposed to scrutinize the budget brought in. The legislature will pass that budget with the padding, which are billions of naira. And as long as the budget is returned back to the executive with assertions from the legislature, the idea of you rub my back, I rub your back prevails. So this is a winning formula for corruption. Therefore, who will change it? The coach, as we have, they will never change it. Until Nigerians arise and work, first of all, against their own legislation, those they elected. Because at the executive, we elected only one man. Every liabilities of his appointees, they are his own. He takes responsibility. That's why the buck stops in his table. So we must look at this system and change it. Then that leads to the second one, which Madam asked. Professor Darah, thank you very, very much. You dealt with that exclusively, which Madam asked. That leads that, is it the white man or the colonialist that is telling us that this is bad, this is not bad? Professor Darah mentioned something in his earlier opening. The road connecting the southeast or the west-east that is supposed to go to Port Harcourt and terminate somewhere in Calabar up to Akwa Ibom. That contract was first of all awarded by Shehu Shagari when he was president of Nigeria over 40 years ago. And as we talk, that contract remains on stream. I am not too sure if my future generation will see that contract coming to fruition. And every year, money is voted, and nothing returns back to the kitty. Or look at the other way of it. A senator in Nigeria goes away with about 33 million naira. Please, I have my facts on record. I speak with authority. With about 33 million naira every month. But what is the salary of the senator? According to the Revenue and Fiscal Distinct Commission that allocated salary, it is 750,000 naira. Then they got to the chamber as now dishonorable members, as now horrible members, and they make allowances for themselves that now aggregated their take away every month 33 million. Whereas the policeman who is guiding him, who is making sure that his life is safe, is going away at the end of every month with less than 30,000 naira. So as long as this is an injustice, what would it breed? It will breed another injustice. But the answer, therefore, is not Jerry's formula. Jerry's formula can only come two ways. Either coup, and coup is no more anything good, because at the end of the day, the coups, what benefit did they bring for Africa? They were what mostly the colonial masters use in eliminating those who are dynamic in Africa. Or there is a law. Professor Darah, thank you again. You mentioned China. You cannot just accumulate money in China. The bullet is waiting for you. This is legislative. This is law. But can we make such law and implement it now? Not with the people we have now at the National Assembly, or the state houses of assembly, or the councils at the local government. No. So what my conclusion is this, my recommendation on conclusion is this. Using the Nigeria example, let Nigerians arise. If they say they will start from the executive, the issue of Lekki Toll Gate may happen. Let them arise against their own representative, whom they elected individually. The 109 senators, the 300 houses of assembly, houses of representatives. Let them arise and pull them out in the next coming election, because the only way to change government in any democratic setup is by your PVC, permanent voters card. And this you exercise at that point, and pull them out and bring people that will be able to represent them well, to check themselves. And those now will check a president that is going kubasol. Those one will check the president. But when people you elected says, anything the president brings for us, we will approve. We will never go against him. You never voted me to go and fight battle. No, we don't have way. For now, corruption must be fought through laws, not through coup, and not through massive barrier, as somebody says. Even if it will be through massive barrier, let it be through the legislative process so that it can be democratic. It can be done if we are ready. As long as a Nigerian will stop himself from taking a bag of rice when elections are coming, that will help. But even if you take the bag of rice, the politician who brought you the bag of the rice, he did not buy the rice with his father's money, with his mother's money. We knew them before they went into offices, whom their parents are. Take the rice, then vote him out. Vote somebody that all of you within your community. And that is how our forefathers led the people, community appraiser. So if we do this, we will be in the dynamic. I'm only just using the Nigerian setup as a formula for the whole of Africa, because there is no time that every African nation will come together, call themselves and say, let's go and do this. No, but one country like Rwanda now, we have examples we are following in Rwanda. That can start, it can start even from Nigeria, which is the leader, so to say, in Africa. Then at the end of the day, Professor Darah, thank you very much for being with you, for sharing your knowledge. Dr. Agwi, I'm very, very most grateful. Thank you very, very much. And Dr. Lumumba, I always listen to you, and it's nice to be on the same platform with you. Dr. Edobor, thank you very, very much, because this is an opportunity. What I'm gathering this evening, I don't think I will be able to gather it in the next 50 years. That is if I still have 50 years to go. So I thank all of you. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Well, don't go yet. So thank you very much for that emotional final statement. Thank you very, very much. So I will call on Dr. Agwi to also make his final contribution. And after that, very brief, please. After that, Professor Lumumba will just make his final statement and Dr. Agwi will just make the vote of thanks. And then we round up, please. Okay, Dr. Agwi, please, brief response.
Yes, thank you very much.
Said.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would just like to go straight to Madam Otis' question, which is a lack of political will. It's a quality education, and they also mentioned about quality followers. Actually, I think Nigeria, we don't have the political will to do anything now. The people are so digested, they are frustrated, they are not in them, they don't think straight again. So there's a lot of frustration going on in the land. Hence, we have this situation now in Nigeria where everybody wants to go their way. Just like in a marriage, once there's no love, there's no affection, there's no listening, people they'll start looking towards the exit door. But once the love come back, once the affection come back, see that everyone will now be taking towards the inner door. So that is the problem with Nigeria. Is the people are so frustrated that they have lost their way of thinking. In Nigeria now, averagely, people, they are just waiting for their turn to loot. That is just the queue that is available. The political situation is that people are negotiating which tribe, which session will take over the next election so that they themselves will benefit. So that we cannot sustain. That will only lead us to peril. So what I will advise is that the government should come down and try to bring some sanity into our political system. Like all my previous panelists have said, there must be, we have to put some control into the political system, into how we elect people, the criteria we use, and the funding. Election funding should be limited to a certain amount of money. You cannot be funding election with unlimited amount of money, which we know those people don't have. So where are they getting that money, spending billions to fund an election? What are they going there to gain? Their salary is enough. If their salary is 750,000, is it enough to pay their billions they spend on election? No. So it means they have other interior motive. So the government themselves, they know that. So this question now goes to the government. Government, are they part of the show or they are just standby? I would say they are both. So the government itself, in any corporate situation in the West, once a company goes down, the head of the company goes first. Because they believe once the head is rotting, the whole body goes down with it. So it's not, you cannot see a rotting government and think the head is clean, never. The people, when you lead organizations, you know that people look up to you. And whatever you do, that is what they are going to replicate downwards. If they see you are stealing, they are going to steal. If they see that you are organized and direct, that is what they will become too. So this question is of our leaders. Our leaders, we have to elect new leaders. I don't believe the leaders we have now, I don't know if we can recycle them again, but I don't believe in that. I believe new leaders are coming. That I also hope that Africa will come to that end. We know the fact that we are discussing issue now means there's a solution in the horizon for us. So just like Professor Lumumba has said, it's a good thing that we are moving forward. Africa, as it is today, in the next 100 or so years, will be very, very quite different. We just have to keep the discussion on. We should not let it down because it's through this discussion, no matter how small it is, that change will happen. Even after the discussion, if we can change one mind to be good, I can bet you that we are in the right track to becoming a free and united Africa. Then the quality of followers. I think followers, like I said before, they are the one who gives power to the politicians. So though they don't know it, some of them don't realize the power they have. They just give it willingly away. But in the West, where we reside, we are bored, is the people have the power to take somebody up or bring that person down. So I think it's high time in Africa we started to teach the people their power, to let them know the power they have. So we may start with small seminars, community seminars, in a small park, just to educate people the powers they have that they can use to bring change. And I believe gradually people will begin to grasp that power and they will begin to use it. Then on the question of mass burial for all our public officials, it's not something I would recommend because it's not democratic in itself. They said those who kill by the sword will also die by the sword. So that is the issue with that. We don't believe that killing everybody will bring sanity to Africa. Suppose you kill everybody and the rest remaining, they could be the worst. They are coming, it could be on a different platform, entirely different from what we have now. So I believe that we should, law and order should be an issue that we should approach. Law and order should be something that we should encourage. And also those people who are found to be guilty of any looting, they should be disgraced and not honored, where it's done in Africa now, where people who have looted are given a chieftaincy tattoo and others. I remember when I was growing up in my village, if anybody steal anything, they would carry that person, put the stolen goods on this person's head, then they would beat drum, and the person will dance around the whole village. I can bet you, no person would like to repeat that experience twice in his or her whole life. I think that's what we should do in Nigeria. If those people who are corrupt, who are found to be guilty of their crime, they should be disgraced. All their property should be confiscated, and everything they have should be taken away. And government should make them to work hard labor to recover all those, to show the people coming that there's no good thing in stealing. But what we have is different now. You see children, they want to become politicians. If you ask them why they don't want to become politicians, because they want to be rich. Politics is now an avenue of acquiring wealth in Africa, which is not supposed to be so. It's supposed to be an avenue to serve the people and help the people to grow. So I would like to end my contributions on that note, and I thank everyone and the questionnaire as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Agwi. I think we will now give the floor to Professor Lumumba. After Professor Lumumba, Dr. Agwi, you will make a brief vote of thanks, please, a brief one, so that we can round up. So
okay, thank you
for Professor Lumumba, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think my colleagues have spoken, and they have spoken passionately and powerfully. I just want to respond to the question, what can Africa do to immunize ourselves from the diabolical machinations of Western countries and progressively China? The answer is simple. We must unite. And unity, when we talk about unity, we must not be understood to be simplistic and naive about it. We are not saying that there'll be sameness. Our unity will be in diversity. And indeed, it is our diversity that is our strength. Do I see us moving in that direction? Yes, I do. That is how I understand some of the recent initiatives. You look at the Africa Agenda 2063 is designed to be the overarching policy position that will lead us in that direction of unity. You look at some of the ideas that were generated in 1980 under the Lagos Plan of Action on reducing dependency on foreign powers, which has now been articulated under Africa Agenda 2063 and been further articulated under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. You look at the Yamoussoukro Agreement on Free Skies. You look at the Kigali Protocol on a single passport. You look at the Maputo Protocol on issues of agriculture, the Malabo Protocol, and there is no shortage of initiatives. What Africa must now get into is a phase of implementation of some of the decisions that have been made continentally and regionally. And if you look at the regional bodies, there have been quite a number of useful interventions and proposals under ECOWAS, quite a number of proposals under SADC, a number of good proposals under the East African Community, IGAD, COMESA, and even in the Maghreb. And I believe that if we do these things, we will be able to interact with the rest of the world. It must never be understood that when we talk about African unity, we are saying that we no longer deal with the rest of the world. We will, but on our own terms. We'll deal with the Chinese on our terms, the Americans on our terms, the Russians on our terms, and the Europeans on our terms. And it's the duty of all of us, those of us who are resident in the mother continent, and those of you who are resident outside of the mother continent, but are intimately allied and aligned to our aspirations, we must all have our hands on deck going forward. And it's only in that way that we are going to sensitize our young men and women to remove some of these political dinosaurs who sit on the path of Africans' progress. And this can be done, and is being done. Some of the uncoordinated efforts and activities that we've seen recently in Chad and in Mali, these are the early signs of the dissatisfaction of African peoples with regimes which undermine their views. There'll be setbacks, there'll be counter-revolutionaries, there'll be fifth columnists, but if we remain faithful to the overall agenda, we will achieve the desired goal. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm happy to have joined you this evening to engage and wrap our minds around a very important and topical subject, the issue of Africa. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lumumba, for that insightful final statement. I wish to use this opportunity to thank you, Professor Lumumba, before Dr. Agwi makes the vote of thanks. I know how difficult it was for you to join us today due to technical problems. I wish to apologize to all those who received their registration confirmation notice and joining instruction in the German language. Thank you also for your patience for waiting almost an hour before we could resolve the problem. Professor Darah, thank you also very, very much for the time you have spent with us this evening. I mean, Dr. Agwi is still going to do the vote of thanks. Dr. Agwi, forgive me for just saying these few words. So thank you so much for being with us. And of course, Mr. Etakubuebu, thank you so much for the time. Of course, Dr. Agwi, of course, also thank you very, very much for the time you have spent. So it's over to you now to please do the final vote of thanks so that we can just round up. Thank you so much, Dr. Agwi.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Edobor. Thank you. On behalf of the Nigerian Global Roundtable, on behalf of all those who are present here today as participants, I would like to thank you professionally, Professor Lumumba, for your presence, for your word. I believe that your word today has sown a seed in our heart, and this seed, I believe, will grow, will blossom, and it's going to be a blessing to us and to Africa itself. And I also want to use the opportunity to thank also all my fellow panelists, Dr. Darah, for a live and warm way of speaking that touched the hearts. And the smile on his face is also very contagious. And I believe that we have benefited so much from your experience, from all what you have told us today, what you have lectured us on. And we believe also that a soul will be touched today, that Africa will be on the right track. I want to thank you, Professor Darah, and Mr. Etakubuebu. Sorry for the name, it's a little bit long. We are very grateful, sir, that you are with us today. Your passion of speaking through your heart is very well fed among us. In short, when you speak, your heart is open for people to know. Well, you can see that you are a man of passion, a man of the people. We appreciate that in you. And we believe that many participants who are here today and many that will watch the video will see that in you as well. And in all, I'd like to thank everyone, because all what you have done today is going to help us, going to help Africa, going to help us, Nigerians and Kenyans, and all those other parts of Africa to become one, to grow as one, and to also help to bring others along. We just want to thank you. And the participants who have been very patient, we want to just express our gratitude to you. We appreciate your patience. Please forgive us. This technology is still new on its own, but we hope to work on it better so that next time things will move more slowly. So we thank you for your presence. We believe also you have benefited from the discussion we have today. And please always stay in touch with us. You have all our contacts. If you would like to join us, you can connect with Dr. Edobor. He is the coordinator of the forum, and he will be able to put it through. We are hoping to everybody joining us from all over the world who have interest in helping to make Africa and Nigeria by extension better and develop more. So I would like to just stop there and say thank you. Prof, thank you very much. I know you are in Kenya. I know you are very far away, but technology has brought us so near, just like Professor Darah and Mr. Etakubuebu. So we thank you all. And hopefully by next time, we will be joining us as well as we organize our next African Developmental Forum. So thank you. I'll hand over to Dr. Jones.
So thank you once again, and we wish you a nice evening still. And with this, I say thank you so much for being with us, and good night. So we are ending now the conversation. So bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Agwi. Thank you, Dr. Edobor.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Okay.
We thank you all for your support.
Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Darah. Bye. That was good.